O.J. Johnson has a background in research and nonprofit work. Her roles in her career have been rooted in strategy and operations, driving impact with everything she does. She cares not only about good strategy, but also the well-being of her fellow human beings. She is a University of Utah alumni pursuing her Master of Business Administration, the same program for which we are both currently enrolled. I'm excited to welcome this dear friend of mine, OJ Johnson, to episode 3 of the Why Not podcast. Welcome, OJ. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Noah, for having me and for that intro. I'm like, my ego's already boosted, so I'm so ready to record this.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your willingness to meet with me and to talk about life. And yeah, your work is inspiring and fantastic, and I'm appreciative of your willingness to talk with me. I'd love for to start with your story. On this podcast, I like to ask my guests to share what's their story. What is their life story? So if you could summarize the OJ story, I'd love to hear that.
Absolutely. I was trying to think of how I would even start to tell this life story because every time someone asks, "What's your life story?" I'm like, "Give me some context. Like, do you want to
Mm,
know, like, being raised in another country, being white American, like that version of the
yeah,
story? Or do you want to
yeah.
know, like, educationally, what's your life story?" But I kind of settled on the phases I feel like I've gone through.
Okay.
So here's a little factual summary. Born in America, moved as a really, really young baby to Japan, was raised there at an all girls Catholic school. Uh, Moved to Connecticut for 2 years in middle school, went to a public school, very eye opening. Moved back to Japan, graduated high school, came to Utah for college because I was told Utah was the only place I could get assistance for paying for college, and lived in California for a brief couple of years and came back to Utah and I've been here ever since. So that's the geographic background. But
Wow. That's that sounds like quite the journey, a global round trip story. That's
truly,
fantastic.
and more to come, more
And more
places to
to come.
go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where do you think you'll go after Utah? Or
Oh,
are you
my
planning on staying in Utah? Yeah.
to visit, next place is Iceland. To live,
Okay.
probably Washington or Oregon.
Fantastic. I love that. You mentioned in as you were sharing all the different places you lived, your experiences with different schools. You have been in Catholic school, you've been in public middle school in the US, and you've also pursued your college. You have your undergraduate through the University of Utah, and you're pursuing your graduate degree there as well. I'd love to hear what the difference is between all of those experiences. You did private, public, college. I want to hear your thoughts on all of it.
It was actually pretty interesting. I had a very similar conversation with someone the other day where they asked what was the first time you realized there was inequity in education. And I said sixth
Mm,
grade
mm,
because growing up in Japan, education was priority.
mm,
Um, Not only to go, but to learn to be a little bit competitive about it, to learn as much as you can, get ahead.
mm.
And it was this tiny little Catholic international school. So, like, diversity was everywhere all the time. We had a One World Day, we had constant celebrations of people's backgrounds. Um, and then I moved to Connecticut to a public school. I met a boy for the first time. That
Oh,
was
wow.
that was pretty eye-opening. But most of all, I just realized that education is different depending on where you are, just
Huh.
geographically. Um, the school can change from the teachers to how parents interact to the curriculum, but really overall, it's the values of education in the community
Mm,
that creates the school. because my Catholic school is very much like learning is the most important thing you can do right now. Like we'll have recess so you can have a break, but you're here to learn.
Yeah.
And this public school felt a little bit like babysitting almost.
Mm.
Like we just need to get you safely in, safely through the day, safely home.
Yeah, more of that survival type of operation belt, guess you could say.
Exactly.
Well, that's great insight. I also value education quite a lot. Of course, we met through the MBA program, and it's something that for my life, it's been revolutionary for me. It's provided opportunities I never would have had otherwise. Like as you're saying, there is a difference in terms of how you can go about education. And I think those differences can impact change, can impact innovation, and can impact the trajectory of someone's life. So I'd love to know, given your experience in that field, what do you feel makes for a better educational experience? Like what is needed for that learning and that or that competitive learning even to happen?
Absolutely. Um, and this is going to be a really simplistic answer,
Love it.
but basic needs met.
Huh.
It's the biggest educational inequity I see in the research, I see in person working with people is
Yeah.
uh, when there are problems in school measurements of educational attainment,
Mm,
it's never a question of if the student wants to learn.
mm,
It's usually a question of do they have what they need to want to learn? Do they
mm,
have a bed that they're sure they're going to be able to be safe in and sleep in tonight? Because some students, even in young schools, are homeless. Um, there is a question of have they had enough to eat? There's a question of do they feel psychologically safe at school? And all these things that are very basic needs that I very much took for granted at the school I
mm,
was in as an elementary schooler. It's just not a thing for everybody.
mm.
But it's never a question of if the kid wants to learn. Every kid wants it.
I appreciate you sharing that. And that's a beautiful insight because I do think there is a narrative right now that kids these days, they just don't care about school. They don't care about education. And to some extent, I think that's kind of true, but more so from the older kids, like like millennials that are trying to prove they don't need that college degree. And in some cases, they don't, of course. But I think that's a beautiful insight you share because it highlights the value of natural curiosity. And every child has that. And I feel like your work in the nonprofit space may add additional perspective on this, like you were sharing. So tell me a little bit more about your work. You work in the nonprofit space for the sake of those listening. Explain what you do and how you're able to impact others through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for a group called Utah's Promise, and within Utah's Promise, there are three other groups. There is 211 Utah, which is a helpline. You can call 211 anytime with any question. But mostly it's a resource hotline. Like,
Mm,
where would I go to find reduced school lunches for my kid who's in school here? And they find you a person. They're super amazing staff, really, really incredible people. And then there is United Way Salt Lake, which is kind of the nonprofit name. Any if anyone's going to recognize one of the names, it's going to be this
yeah.
one because
Okay.
they're a
Very nice.
worldwide organization.
Wow.
And they're kind of the core of us, but that's more the internal teams, our finance, our marketing.
Okay.
And then there is our Promise Partnership team, and this is another external facing team where we work on networks and projects. And so essentially, what all these do all together is we are working on a goal of 100% graduation and 100% basic needs met in
Mm,
the Promise South Salt Lake area. So our
wow.
organization focuses on a geographic area and essentially says we're going to get everyone on the same page that kids
Yeah.
deserve equitable education. So we're going to talk to the teachers. We're going to talk to the students. We're going to talk to volunteer groups. We are going to talk to legislators. We're going to talk to parents. We are going to talk to businesses. We're going to basically make friends so that
Yeah.
we can make it better. It's
That
what summarized is called backbone organizing.
okay. That's inspiring. That's so fantastic. And man, I just can't imagine how much good that can do. Because you're not only focusing on the academic rigor, right? You're focusing on those basic needs and making sure they're met. And I think that's such a valuable insight that a lot of people may not see. Um, because that is so critical. As humans, we're not going to operate efficiently if we don't have those basic needs met. Like there's so much scientific research that talks about, okay, at work, if you're not happy, you're not going to be as productive. And it baffles me how it's hard for so many people to make that connection to younger adults, teenagers, and children that if they're not happy, either because they don't have a bed, they don't have enough food, they don't have safety, they're not going to learn well and they're not going to be able to comprehend things as easily. And they certainly won't be well behaved because they're kids. And if a kid feels like their needs are unmet, then they're in survival mode. And good luck teaching a kid in survival mode. Like, good luck figuring that out. And I think it's an important piece to the puzzle that you're solving. And I love that.
Absolutely. I used to hear the phrase all the time from parents and teachers, and nothing makes me angrier than when I hear this phrase, but they used to say, oh, they're just, a difficult child. It would make me so angry because I don't think there is such thing. I think humans are just difficult, all of us.
Yeah.
As difficult as a kid is, adults are also difficult. Like, let's not single the kids out. um, and really what these people are saying when they say that is this kid is not getting all their needs met.
Mm,
But they're putting it's called deficit-based language when they put it on the kid and tell
mm,
them they're a difficult child. But more asset-based language that doesn't focus on the kid would say the kid is
yeah.
not receiving everything it needs.
Wow. That, and you said that's called the deficit language?
Deficit-based language and
Deficit.
asset-based language.
Huh. Wow.
Kind of like the difference of deficit-based language would be
Yeah.
a disabled person.
Mm,
Asset-based language is people living with a disability.
okay. It feels as though that starts to tap into almost positive psychology, where in the way that we refer to ourselves and others can directly impact our cognitive um, stereotyping, quite honestly, and biases. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more to understand your expertise in that because I'll share that something I'm working on right now personally. This is not so much in my professional life, but in personal life is to not say I am angry or I am sad, but I am feeling angry and I am feeling sad and disconnecting those emotions from myself. So it feels very similar to that. Would you agree? I'd love to understand more what you know on this.
Absolutely. I owe a very, very big debt of gratitude to this therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy. It
Okay.
was extremely helpful for me, and one of the biggest things I learned in it is called dialectic thinking, which is, to dive a little bit into philosophy, essentially
Yes.
the idea that truth is individual. And in that
Mm,
way, there's not a single truth. And
mm,
that two things can be true, three things can even be true. And so it falls right in place with this, where when you say they're a difficult child, when you say, I am angry, you are deciding. You are saying, this is the box. And I
mm,
go right there in the box. But dialectical thinking is saying, no, you're still the individual and you're feeling angry. And I'm guessing you also might be feeling some other things, like maybe you're a little hungry. Maybe like maybe you didn't do well on something, and maybe this is a little connected to some other things as well. And
Yeah.
maybe you're also happy for some weird reason because you're wearing your favorite shoes. Like multiple things can be happening at the same time. And I think I just absolutely love when people start to shift from saying, I am mad to I'm feeling mad,
Mm,
because it recognizes it's not the only thing you are. It's not the only
mm.
thing going on, but it is something that's real.
You gave me goosebumps saying that. It's such an important distinction, especially like in our current society. Things are stressful. Things are stressful for like basic needs not being met for a lot of people, like you're saying. I on LinkedIn I talk a lot about the difference between GDP and GDP per capita, where everyone said, "Oh, the economy is fine," because on the grand scale, like grand scheme of things, yeah, it is actually doing pretty good. But for the average buying power, it's down, and that causes a lot of stress. That causes a lot of emotional turmoil from the adults, and that, of course, transcends into the child's experience. But the other reason that I really love how you express the difference between almost being a victim to your emotions, a victim to your surroundings, and an independent action taker, um, is because a lot of times for those in those situations, it's hard to fathom something different. And it's hard to believe that something can be different. And you almost have to have that outside third party to show you that, in fact, there is a difference, that you are not your emotion and you are not your situation, you are not your background. And because of that distinction, you have the ability to change it. And that is so core, so core to this conversation, is that ability to change things by distinguishing the difference between yourself and your surroundings or your background and your emotions. I'd love to know. It looked like you were writing something down. I'd love to know if you have more thoughts on that, or maybe a story of where you've seen this do some real good.
Absolutely. Um, I am taking a design business class right now,
Hmm.
and sorry, I like was forgetting his name, and I just remembered it.
No
Um,
worries.
I'm taking the design business strategy class right now, and it's absolutely so fun because it's the first business class I've taken that has some design, which is
Nice.
a little bit of my undergrad background. Is I have
Hmm.
a minor in design and a minor in social impact, then
Very
major in
nice.
sociology. Um, and in this class, we did our first project, and it was all about emotion,
Hmm.
which is really funny, because no one really thinks I am gonna go get
Yeah.
my MBA and learn about emotion. You kind of think I'm gonna go get my MBA and learn about accounting and finance.
Yeah.
Uh, but this professor said, you can't leave yourself out of the equation when you think about
Hmm.
business, because who you are is the one thing you take with you everywhere.
Hmm.
And when you make a product, when you're selling a product, there's emotion that goes with that. There's when you're selling it, you're coming with it as well. And if we just completely ignore that,
Hmm.
we might miss out on leveraging some strengths or trying to mitigate some risks. And so the question the professor asked was, what emotion do you notice when you walk into a room? When you think about the world, what emotion do you feel needs something, is calling to you to create a product
Hmm.
or to create a solution in a better sense? And the
Yeah.
word that kept coming back to me was defeat. I feel like a lot of times right now I look at the world and I see defeat in people's eyes, where they feel like it can't get better. This won't get better.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit infectious, honestly, because
Absolutely.
it's just that safety in knowing it won't get better. There's a little bit of danger and hope, because what if you get let down? If it does
Hmm.
get worse?
Yeah.
Um, And so I think that the world is slipping into a little bit of a defeat mindset. Uh, and the thing I wanted to quote, it's James Baldwin.
Mm.
In an interview, he's asked, "Are you still in despair about the world?" And James Baldwin replies, "I've never been in despair about the world. I've been enraged by it. I don't think I'm in despair. I can't afford despair.
Mm.
I can't tell my nephew, my niece, you can't tell the children that there's no hope." And I just love that phrase, like, I can't afford despair,
Yeah.
because you are the only one at the end of the day who has to have your own back. And there's this thing called realistic optimism we learned from Professor Cummings of, you don't have to think things are going to be great. You don't have to think things are going to work out. You can be realistic of, this is the context, but realistic optimism is saying something can happen. Something can change. We can do something.
Mm.
And I think that's just extremely powerful.
Yeah. That's very powerful. It's very powerful. And it it's critical. I think, for the sake of those listening who don't know as much about me and OJ, we're both Zillennials, so we're that nice in between generation between millennials and Gen Z. So it's very hard for others to place our age in the day to day in the real world, you could say. And
Yeah, especially when you have such expansive and good
yeah,
music taste.
exactly. Exactly. We have the 90s rap and the early 2000s pop. It's beautiful.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of talk about millennials and Gen Z not being emotionally prepared and emotionally developed, and that a lot of people need therapy right now. A lot of people are depressed. And a lot of that conversation comes from those who came before. And we miss an important part of the conversation when you ignore what you just said, when you ignore the fact that pessimism is contagious. There's been a lot of hard things in the last 3 decades. Of course, those are challenging for adults, but we experience them as children. We experience them as teenagers. Like I have vivid memories of the 2008 crash, but I don't have memories of that as a father. So that would be very, very hard. I have memories of that as a child, or I guess I should say like a tween. Um, and that does something to you because then you start to see the world through a negative light, and it's defeat. Exactly like you said, it's defeat. Things won't get better because it'd be impossible for them to, and that's my baseline, and that feels safer. And because I'm already anxious, I'm gonna cling to whatever safe baseline I have. And the problem is then you never have that hope that you need. And
Absolutely.
change is the application of hope.
Exactly. And DBT, the dialectic they focus on,
Mm.
is the dialectic between acceptance of what is and change of what could be,
Mm.
and having both, that you have to accept where you are in order to go anywhere from here.
Mm.
And I think the best example and the best story of hope is that we're here.
Mm.
We're still here. And I
Yeah.
love the name of this podcast. Why not? Because it's how I have learned to deal with a lot of the anxieties that I have internally, is to literally ask what would happen.
Mm.
Why not? Like, what would happen? What is the worst case scenario? And to say it out
Mm.
loud. If I go on this podcast and I say something really stupid, I might look really silly. Some people might listen. Some people might be like, whoops, she said that. And that'll probably be worst case scenario. And so instead, you just get kind of excited because at the
Mm.
same time, I could say something smart. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anything might happen. Um, but my favorite example is just how the world has gone through crisis after crisis after crisis, all of human history. There's never
Right.
been a moment where things were just peaceful on the earth when humans were here. We're
Yeah.
a little bit of a chaotic animal,
Yeah.
but we
It's true.
continue to stay here. We
Mm,
continue to make it through, and we continue to kind of learn how to treat each other better. We definitely falter a lot, but we are slowly learning how to refer to each other, how to work together, how to make new technologies that might make life better. And to me, that's a huge message of hope is things are crazy. Things are nuts. Things are heartbreaking and traumatic constantly,
mm,
but it's constant. There will be hard things to come because there have always been hard things,
mm.
but we've always survived them. So chances are we will probably continue surviving.
Wow. I feel like I could cut it off right there and that would be like the mic drop moment. No, that was beautiful. I appreciate you saying that because it really is about the hope of change or like change can be hopeful. And and I appreciate your kind words on the name of the podcast. And that's really what I hope people get from it. Um, and it's also why I wanted to make sure that I bumped this conversation up to my next releasing episode because I know you have this incredible insight into change with your nonprofit, educational and background and everything. And it's such an important conversation because with without it, you can't talk about innovation. You can't talk about about having that creative questioning mindset. Like it is all in vain if you are unable to connect that change and hope have to be just rock hard. They are legally contractually binding together and it's the kind of
Yes.
court can't appeal type of connection. And so I appreciate you sharing that. If I may share a personal story, when you were talking about the education that you've experienced and how you've noticed that people without their basic needs met struggle to in the educational environment, and how your nonprofit work really focuses around helping um, those who need that help to be recognized and supported and found. I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian home, and part of their belief structure was that they needed to homeschool me and that they needed to prioritize religion more than education. And a- and I mean we can get into why I don't think homeschooling is good, but that's not really the point of this episode or conversation, of course. But really, for me as a child in that position, it was very challenging for several reasons, but mainly because there was a sense of neglect because I wasn't learning what I needed to be learning. And it was like the type of homeschooling where homeschooling is no schooling. And as I was in that situation, it's very easy to feel stuck. And and the only way I was able to find my way out of that was through education, but also through that hope of realistic optimism. I knew that I wouldn't be able to dramatically change my life as a teenager, but I could make pivots so that by the time I was the age I am now, I could be sitting here having a conversation with an incredible person about change. And I wish someone doing the work that you and your nonprofit are doing had been there for me in that moment, that had recognized, oh, this kid is going without basic needs. This kid is not getting the education he needs, and we might be able to help in this situation. Like that would have been dramatic for me. And so I just want to thank you for the work that you do and thank you for the impact that it is having because a lot of that impact you probably won't see. But even in things such as a simple conversation for whoever is able to listen to this, I want to thank you because it is important and our generation needs it, and all the generations that are going to follow will certainly need it. And like you said, these patterns, these cycles are just part of the human experience. It's just part of life, but that doesn't mean we have to accept the way we handle them.
Damn, Noah, got me in my feelings. If I can exchange a personal story for a personal
Please,
story.
please.
So I dove in to this MBA kind of rashly.
Mm,
I applied because they had waived the application fee because I had attended some recruiting events,
very nice.
and they didn't require the GMAT, and I didn't want to take that test, and I didn't expect to get in. I applied because I wanted feedback on how to make my application stronger in the
Mm,
future. I was really sure I wasn't ready for one. Um, and then I got that email that said you're in. And I panicked. I was like, what? What do I do? What do I do?
yeah.
And I really wanted to get an MBA. So I did it. And first two semesters were pretty excruciating
Mm,
because I went in thinking you can't do this.
mm,
And it affected everything. It affected how I showed up to class. It
mm,
affected how I showed up for my team.
yeah.
And pretty
Mm,
honestly, the team had to carry me for a lot of the two first semesters. And I felt really ashamed that, usually I'm a pretty ambitious person and I can contribute something creative and fun and maybe thoughtful to a project. But those two first semesters, I was just crying. I was skipping class because I just felt like the dumbest person there. And this all to say that one of the things that really helped me was you.
mm. Wow.
Meeting you and your ability to know and understand business, but also apply it in a very personal and human sense, gave me so much hope, especially when you talk about growth. And I remember pretty early on, you posted this thing on LinkedIn about getting up and it being dark and like feeling like Batman. And I just found so much motivation that there was someone that was saying you can get better.
Mm,
That even though I truly felt like I couldn't do it, there was someone close to me who wasn't necessarily doing it directly to me, but was saying, you may not be able to do it right now. Like, you may not be doing it well right now, but it doesn't mean you never will. And it transformed my experience. We're in our second year now, and I just, I love it now. I enjoy going to class. I enjoy working on homework. It's too much all the time, but I'm excited that I'm learning. And it was that basic need to think that I could. And so I am truly heartbroken that no one was there when you were not getting what you needed to learn. But I am very grateful that you were there when I wasn't, because you really helped me to see that my biggest enemy is me, and even I can't stop me.
damn, you're gonna you got me in the feelings right now. That's
Karma.
very that's very kind of you to say, and I really appreciate it. And I have seen a lot of growth in just observing how you've tackled things head on. And a lot of times being in the same program is very unique, and I will get discouraged as one does with working, homework load, everything like that. And I can't quit. I thought about dropping out a few times because it's hard, but I was like, no, like
Yep,
I
I
can't
filled
do
out the
this.
paper and
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, like, I appreciate you saying that. I think one of the biggest values of college, especially in the graduate program, is the people you meet and the people you can invest in and the people that will invest in you. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's very meaningful to me. Um, so thank you. I think a big part of what you were saying aligns very closely with a value that I have, which is that one is better than zero. And I think I got it from a Gary Vaynerchuk post, to be completely honest. I don't claim the origin of it. I try to research who actually came up with it first and couldn't find anything. But that idea that one is better than zero is it capitalizes on what you shared, on the fact that, yeah, even if you're not perfect today, just moving forward is huge. Like you think about compounding interest, compounding impacts, compounding habits and human behavior. It's all a matter of doing little things at a time, and those build up over time to create something beautiful and something big. And I I'm inspired by what you said because that is true. I think it impacts you, it impacts me. It can impact anyone who's willing to respect the one, the 1% effort. Because sometimes when you are in that survival mode, sometimes when you just need that self-belief, you're not gonna jump to 120%. Like that isn't realistic optimism. In fact, that's almost defeatism disguised as quote unquote optimism. And from my experience, like that does not lead to change. That leads to burnout and then quickly going back to whatever you were doing before. And the key is to make those small adjustments, but over time, that 1% will become that 120% because you've stacked 120 ones. And that that's just powerful concept. I'd love to know in your life, where have you seen the impact of toxic perfectionism?
What a topic, man. Where haven't I? Uh, Being assigned female at birth, it's just like ingrained in everything everyone says to you all the time. Like you show up to a basketball game and they're like, "Are you not wearing makeup?" And it's like, "What? Was that the point of this?" Um,
Oh, wow.
Toxic perfectionism. Where have I seen that show up most? I am pretty close with my dad.
Hmm,
We are pretty good friends, and one of the reasons is we think so similar sometimes.
hmm,
Uh, and it can be hard to be in your own head trying to
hmm,
figure something out, so we'll often go to each other. And one thing I've noticed that we have in common is we kind of have this ambition, inherent belief that we can help anyone,
hmm,
that we can solve any problem for someone else.
hmm,
Uh, and it's pretty cool. Like, there's definitely a superhero side to it, but I would say there's also a supervillain side to it. The
hmm,
superhero side is you really help a lot of people. And the supervillain side to it is you neglect yourself
hmm,
because you are so focused on perfectly helping every person that crosses your path on constantly thinking, what do I have that I can give them, that you forget to hold on to some things for yourself, that you're just as valued as the people you're trying to value and help.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the biggest examples to me is you don't have to do the one thing perfect. If it comes at the expense of not doing another important thing at all, you can still help people. You can still use that ambition to solve their problems, but if you let it be your whole thing, if you let it be, I have to do it perfectly, you're going to be on that hedonic treadmill, stuck in motion forever, never feeling accomplished,
Yeah.
because you can't save every single person because you keep ignoring the one person that needs you most. And I think that's been the biggest example to me.
I appreciate you sharing that. It it rings so true. I I'll fully admit for myself, I don't experience it in the superhero sense, and I admire, honestly, I admire that struggle for you. I think we need more people like that who will lay down on the line and help others. For me, I use hard work as an excuse to not invest in other people, but also not invest in myself. Like you mentioned, the downside to toxic perfectionism is you neglect yourself by seeking to achieve perfection. And and that's so damaging because you really deserve to take care of yourself. Like, what's the point of ambition if you can't apply it to your own life, like to yourself, like to your health, to your mental, physical health, to um your your peace, your life experience. Like, what's the point? Like, I don't get me wrong, I'm a big proponent of hard work. It is set my central worldview. And I'm a big proponent of seeking financial stability. I love money. I pursue money and I want money. I have no problem admitting that out loud. But what's the point of any of that if you're not even going to take care of yourself? Like it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. And so I appreciate you sharing that because it highlights an important thing. Um, so full circle question. Given that we've discussed education and the need to help people with their needs and the need to encourage change by building that belief and the damage that perfectionism, excuse me, can have, what about all this conversation do you wish was taught in school?
I think to especially pull from everything you just said, that hard work and accomplishing something, it's not it's not usually these crazy triumph stories. It's not a Rocky movie where you have a little training montage, you run up some stairs and you punch someone's lights out. Um, Hard work looks a little more boring.
Mm.
It looks a little more tedious. And I'm a big TV nut. I've seen a lot of TV, and there are two quotes that kind of come to mind that play into each other. And the first is actually from Rick and Morty.
Yes, I
When
love
the
that.
family finally goes to therapy, thank you. And it's the therapist finally talking to Rick. And she says, Rick, the only connection between your unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying your family is that everyone in your family, you included, uses intelligence to justify sickness. You seem to alternate between viewing your own mind as an unstoppable force and an inescapable curse. And I think it's because only truly unacceptable concept for you is that your mind is within your control. You
Mm.
choose to be here, you choose to talk. to belittle my vocation just as you become a pickle. Becomes a pickle in the episode, spoiler. You are the
Huh.
master of your universe, and yet you are dripping with rat blood and feces, your enormous mind literally vegetating by your own hand. I have no doubt that you would be bored senseless by therapy the same way I'm bored when I brush my teeth and wipe my ass. Because the thing about repairing, maintaining, and cleaning is it's not an adventure. There's no way to do
Mm.
it so wrong you might die. It's just work. And the bottom line is some people are okay going to work, and some people would rather die. And each of us get to choose. And
Wow.
it's a long
Yeah.
quote. Please feel free
I
to edit it
I love
down.
it. No, absolutely not. I'm keeping all of that. That was very nice.
But I love the message of maintenance. It's not an adventure.
Mm.
Maintenance, it's not exciting. It's not like you talk about running in one of your previous episodes about how
Mhm.
you cross that finish line and you're like, awesome. Uh, you accomplish it.
Yeah.
But maintenance, it's more like when you first run
Mm.
and you're swollen and you're in pain and you're like,
Mhm.
shit, I did not do as well as I wanted to.
Yeah.
But it's those little steps, which leads me to the second quote, which is from BoJack Horseman. Very sad, but good show. BoJack is literally trying to start to run, so in the exact same situation. And right outside his house, there's like this big hill, and he starts his run by going up the hill. Which why would you start with an incline? But
Yeah.
he runs up the hill, basically collapses on the side of the road, and he's like, "I hate this. I'm never doing this again. I'm dead." And this character that's in the background of the show, running all the time, appears above him and says, "It gets easier. Every day it gets a little easier, but you got to do it every day. That's the hard part,
Mm.
but it does get easier." And to kind of sum it all up,
Yeah.
uh, everything we've talked about in this episode, I would say it's going to be hard.
Mm.
Whatever you choose to do, it's going to be hard. Even just sitting on the couch is hard. Uh, get a little sore after a while. And whatever it is you choose to do it because you want to do it because the hard is inevitable. So pick a hard that's worth it. And when you do, don't be disappointed when you don't make giant breakthroughs every day because that's
Mm.
not how hard work is done. Hard work is done in the little annoying, tedious tasks we do every day to take care of ourselves to make sure that we're here the next day to do it again.
Yeah.
And through that, that's how we accomplish great things. And I
Amazing.
wish more kids knew that.
Wow. And that's beautiful. Like being broke is hard. Like you're saying, being broke is hard. Like
Yes.
not showing up to school and having to make things up is hard. Not having a high school diploma is hard. Not having enough like a car is hard. Not like but maintaining a job is hard, right? Like getting a degree is hard. Staying in high school is hard. Making sure you're eating healthy is hard. It's very hard. And and but like so is trying to lose weight. So is needing to take medication because of all the health implications. Like it's all hard. And to highlight the fact that your ability to determine what type of hard you will endure is purely up to you is key. A lot of people talk about how our education system failed because it got people to believe that they won't make a lot of money painting or they won't make a lot of money playing music, when in all reality, I think that is reality. And I think the reason those criticisms are healthy and come from a good place is because what you said is still missing. That it's not just, "Oh, okay, you need to learn how to write and read so you can go make money and go make a difference in the world. But okay, you still need to do that, but it will still be hard because it is a job." Like, let's say you choose to pursue the professional musician career, which I almost did actually. Um,
I want to hear much more about that later. Continue.
that would have been a very hard. tedious job type of career experience. I have some family members that are in the film industry, and they pursued it because they wanted a job that was for their passion, for their dream, and they're quite talented at it, which is how they're able to be paid for it and do quite well with it, which I'm very proud of them. But I was talking to them the other day, and they're like, it ended up just being a job. It ended up just being hard work. And we were trying to avoid that. We were trying to do something that would feel like I don't work a day in my life. And at the end of the day, it's still work. And I think that is something beautiful, not negative, because it is something that you need. Because you will either have that hard, challenging work, or you're going to have everything that comes without it, which will be just as hard, if not worse. So I appreciate everything you've shared. I appreciate your input and your advice and your insight. I'm going to end with my ending question for all the guests that will be on the Why Not podcast, which is, I wrote this down. I got to pull it up so I say it correctly. What does being happy mean to you?
Great question. I thought you were gonna ask why not. Uh, to me, someone recently told me people are getting really bored nowadays, more than ever, because we have so many technologies that not only provide entertainment, but kind of demand attention. And
Mm,
there's this quote from Viktor Frankl that says basically, when humans don't have purpose, we find that entertainment passes the time.
mm,
Um, Great author, highly recommend all of his writings. But this person used kind of that idea to say, I don't think people appreciate where they are in the moment. Because what could be more amazing than where you are right now? Where else would you rather be than right now? And if you have a specific answer, go do that. Go be there. And I just really love that because it's popped into my head so many times. Where like I was stuck in traffic last night, but I was with some great people. We were having a great night, and in my head, I just thought, there's nowhere I'd rather be than stuck in traffic right now because that's where I am right now. And
mm,
I get to be with these people, and there's no promise of tomorrow. There's no
mm.
promise of the next 5 minutes. Life is fickle and fleeting, and there's no exact science, but what I have is literally right now, and I'm happy there. And so I guess that's what happiness means to me is being exactly where you are.
Love it. Well, thank you, OJ. Thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you for those who listen for sticking around to benefit from the insight that OJ has had to share. So thank you,
Thank you, Noah. Thank you for having me.
of course.